Chief, how's the police department set up? What's the structure?
Well, our police department currently has 47 officers. 34 of those officers are assigned to the patrol division, and 9 are assigned to investigations. And that number 9, I'll elaborate on that a little bit as we move on. But the patrol division is headed by Captain Don Lamping, and the investigations and detectives division is headed by Captain Don Hawkins. In the patrol division, those 34 officers are divided onto 3 shifts. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And in order to keep at least 5 cars on the road at all times, we've pretty much had to deplete the investigations division, pulling people out of investigations and assigning them to the patrol division. Even after doing that, though, there's far too many days that we only have 5 patrol cars on duty at any given time. And the problem with that is, for example, those cars get tied up and depleted quite quickly. If there's a wreck on Route 224, that takes 1 or sometimes 2 cars off the road for an hour. A domestic dispute, the law in Ohio requires an arrest to be made in most of those situations. That takes 2 cars off the road for in excess of an hour. A shoplifter, which is common, takes a car off the road for at least an hour by the time the shoplifter is arrested, processed, and put in the county jail. And so you see how quickly 5 cars turn into our inability to respond to an emergency because everybody's tied up on something else. In the past several months, I've noticed I come out and I work on the road quietly in an unmarked car, and I often hear the dispatcher put out a serious call, a man beating a woman in a parking lot. Can any car clear to respond? And it's silence. There's just nobody available because everybody's tied up on something else.
Of course they want to go, right?
They would want to go, but if, for example, if an officer in another location has just arrested somebody and has them sitting in handcuffs in the back seat of the patrol car, he can't respond to another car with a docket, which is a person who's now a prisoner in handcuffs in the back seat of his car. So we quickly deplete our resources on the road by this call after call after call after call. And it's not a good number, 5 patrol cars. I'm very uncomfortable with that, not only because of our inability to respond, but also for the safety factor of our officers. These guys have to watch after each other. They have to have each other's backs while they're working. And with that small number, it's just not happening. You know, they're not getting the backup that they need from each other because they're all tied up.
Are they pouring in more? I mean, are the criminals talk among themselves at all?
Well, you know, there was a time back when our numbers were higher that we have an officer that we hired from the sheriff's department. He worked in the jail, and he would often relate stories about how prisoners in jail that had been arrested would say they're not going to Boardman because when you go to Boardman, the cops stop you. And we tow their cars and we'd put them in jail for things like driving under suspension or carrying a gun or having a small amount of drugs. And we would find them ourselves because of the hunting that we talked about earlier. And they would get in jail and talk about that amongst themselves. And that's a powerful thing if you think about it. When you have prisoners sitting in jail complaining that the reason they were there is because some Boardman cop did a little bit extra, went above and beyond, did an investigation on his own and arrested this person and towed his car away and took his dope and took his gun and took his money and put him in jail. And they talk amongst themselves in jail, and that's like a force multiplier for us. And that's just something that's just not happening enough now. We're getting very little of it, precious little of it, because of the level of activity in the community and because of our numbers on the road.
Your manpower.
Correct.
How does just to wrap this segment up, how do your numbers compare to Youngstown Police, where of course, you know, just you said we're 100 yards from a dope house, of course also on Market Street here. We're about less than a mile away from St. Dom's Church, where there was at least one murder from a woman leaving Mass church and another murder shortly thereafter. how does our manpower, or police force, size-wise, compare to Youngstown and also the populations of our respective cities?
Well, you know, I would say still to this day, the communities are vastly different. Youngstown is a vastly different community than Boardman has traditionally been. But the reason we're sitting here is some of those differences are starting to blur. I mean, we are dealing with more and more urban problems in Boardman on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis. But of course, Youngstown is still quite different than Boardman. Boardman's a township and Youngstown's a city. And the police department in Youngstown, my sense tells me that about 15 years ago reached a point that they were just overwhelmed, that they just did not have the manpower and the staffing to keep the lawlessness off the streets. Now, the best cops I've ever known have been Youngstown police officers. They with the resources they have done a remarkable job, but the problem is those resources. And as the resources had dwindled in the city, merchants couldn't keep merchandise on their shelves. Businesses pulled out because of killings and drug dealing and so on and so forth. And the city was really, their officers were in a situation where they went from call to call to call to call to call. They did not have the ability to hunt, to be out and keeping the thugs off balance and unhappy and worried about getting caught. Nobody's worried about getting caught on the south side. And what scares me is I see this change beginning to happen in our community here in Boardman. And I don't want to be the driver of the Titanic here. I don't want to be the guy in charge when it hits the iceberg. And so that's the reason that I've had to go to the trustees and tell them that, look, we're seeing big changes happening in this community. And we have to take action while we still have a good, wonderful community, because if not, this change happens quickly. It doesn't take a decade for this change to happen. It happens quickly in a matter of months, matter of a few years. You can see radical changes occur. And we just need to be able to draw the line and say enough. We're not going to go there. We want to get back to a position where we keep the thugs uncomfortable. We keep them not wanting to come to our community to deal their drugs, to commit their crimes. And now's the time to do that. You know, I drive through the neighborhoods on the south side of Youngstown quite often. And once your community gets to the point where the aluminum siding's all peeled off the houses, the copper plumbing is all picked out of the basements, it's to the point where they even steal the foundations of the houses because they make nice landscaping stones. Those neighborhoods never, ever come back. They cannot come back. It's not physically capable. And on my way here today, I was coming up Southern Boulevard and I looked at one house, and sure enough, somebody here in the past week or so has peeled the aluminum siding right off the side of the house. We have numerous cases of the plumbing being stolen out of homes that are up for sale here in Boardman. For the copper. And these are the signs of blight that we need to be paying very close attention to as a police department.
Back to the numbers again, Chief. How many?
I think currently Youngstown,
Youngstown
has about 140 officers. Their population is in the area of 65,000 right now, I believe. And Youngstown is it's about 30 to 35 square miles. Boardman is 25 square miles. We have a population of about 42 to 45,000. And the one estimate we get is our daytime population goes up to about 100,000 with the business and so on and so forth. And we have 47 officers at this point.